In this video, I'm going to lead you through and explain coding in super simple and easy to understand terms so that you can understand what it is and how it works. Let's get straight into the video.
So first, let's look at this code. We scroll, we can see it's fairly short for a code, but it can do something pretty cool. And so I'll just click on the play button here and you can see what it does once it runs. So that was the video game Pong. If I'm not mistaken, it was the first video game ever invented. And so it's pretty simple. And I'm going to show you the code for it and explain a little bit about how it works. So first we're going to start off with our variables. From row 1 to row 17. These are all of our variables that we create at the beginning. And variables, they're just quantities that you can create a value for and that usually change throughout the code. And then the void setup is pretty much just setting up the graphics of the screen. So this is the size, like how many pixels by how many pixels my screen is going to be. Here we come to void draw. And so voids are pretty much loops that keep executing over and over. And they're contained within these brackets. So I draw my background and I draw a circle, and that's the ball that you just saw on the screen. I create a rectangle and a rectangle, and those two are the paddles. And these are some of the variables that I put in for their dimensions that I have created up here. And then I create the text for the score down here with instructions about where on the screen to align it, how big the text should be, and so on. And this section of code right here is the part that makes the ball move. So I have the x-coordinate of the ball right here, the variable for the x-coordinate, and then plus equals x speed. Plus equals is just shorthand for x equals x plus x speed. And so I'm adding x speed, which is a variable, to the x-coordinate. So the x-coordinate is getting bigger and moving along the x-axis, and the same for the y. And these two equations right here are letting the paddle move, the left paddle move and the right paddle move. And so here, as you can see, this area of code is about the collisions of the ball against the wall, as you can see from my comment. So I'm not going to go super in depth with this because it's a little complicated with how the program decides to measure height and stuff. But it's basically saying if the ball's Y position is less than the bottom of the screen, so it's gone past the screen, so it's just barely gone past the screen, or if the ball's Y is more than the top of the screen, then the Y speed equals negative Y speed, so the Y speed will reverse because it's negative, and it will go in the opposite direction, bouncing back off the wall. And this is the same thing, but it's collisions with the paddle. And this is kind of complicated, so I'm not going to go into this, but it's pretty much the same thing. You just have to define the border of the paddle and the border of the ball with all of their x and y coordinates and width and such. And then you have to state when they come into contact that the ball has to ricochet off and not go through the paddle. And I just had to do that with the individual paddles. And here's a little code for respawning the ball and respawning the ball with the text and adding variables to the text, so on, but we can skip past that. And then this is void reset for when the ball respawns in the middle once it's gone out of the side. So it says it will respawn, the X will be the width of the screen divided by 2, and then the Y will be the height divided by 2. So they'll be right in the middle of the screen. And the Y speed is random, so the computer generates a random number between -4 and 4. And then this is if Y speed is less than or equal to 2 and Y speed is more than or equal to -2, then it'll reset. So it's cutting out some lower speeds so it won't go really, really slowly, and so on for the X speed. And here is the void key pressed, where we can control what will happen if certain keys are pressed. And so that's how I was controlling the up and down paddles. O and L were the right paddle, O was up, L was down, and W and S were left paddle up and down. So if key equals W, so if the key pressed is equal to the W key, then the L speed equals -10. And you would think it would go down because negative on the screen, but it's actually going up because of a weird wonky thing in the program. So W makes it go up, S makes it go down, and the same thing for O and L for the right paddle on the other side. And then void key released is simply saying if I release the keys, then the speed of the paddles, it doesn't have speed anymore, so then it will just stop. So a quick thing I also wanted to mention is ifs and elses. So let's find a good if. Let's do this one. So we put if, and then in these two parentheses, we have our condition. So if the things in the statement in the parentheses is true, then complete the thing in the bracket that is contained by the bracket. So this bracket and this bracket. And so if this is true, then set Y speed equal to -Y speed. And so in the coding I've done, ifs statements are very, very common, and that's how I create a lot of my codes. And then, but what if it wasn't true? What if it was false? What if this isn't true? What if we want to do something when that's not true, that's different than when it is true? So then you put an else. So then else, and then you create your code, your condition. So say maybe X speed equals -X speed, for example. And that's how you use ifs and elses. So again, if the things in the parentheses are true, then run the things that are encased by the brackets. Else, meaning if the statement inside the if parentheses is false, it's not true, then complete this statement, which then run this function. And that's pretty much it. That was a sneak peek for you to get a sense of what coding looks like and how it works. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.